YouTube! What the crap is going on? HeirofCarthage back with, yes, another Regiment of Renown overview. I had a comment that someone's like, hey, you need to study this out more, you know, like this is an overview. I am very busy at work right now, and my time in the game is pretty limited, and I'm spending most of it recording the Wolfric campaign, but I wanted to cover these units, and what I'm aiming to do here is to give you all an overview of the units. What do they do? What makes them different? A few thoughts of mine. This is not going to be where I've had like hours to delve in and figure out everything they're good against. This is definitely a high-level overview. As I get more time, I intend, before Warhammer 2 comes out, to kind of revisit how all the factions and different units kind of balance in, and we'll talk about each of them individually. So, let's jump into things. The first Regiment of Renown for the Beastmen, as you can see, we're doing the Beastmen tonight. Big surprise, right? It was already on the screen. The Ungor Spearmen with shields. They have a special one called the Destroyers of Drakwold, and essentially these guys are exactly the same. They just have poison. And another person made a comment like, Air, why don't you compare it to a level 9 unit, because these guys are level 9. I don't think that's a good comparison, because usually the level 9 version of these units costs more than the one that you're actually getting. So I like comparing it to the base unit, because typically people in Warhammer are bringing just base units. You don't see a lot of chevroning. It can happen, and there's times when it makes sense. But I'm comparing this, well, you do in campaign. I'm talking multiplayer, so I make this comparison partly for multiplayer. I show the base unit as compared to the one that you're getting for this price. So that's why I do it that way. Essentially, though, yes, some of the stat increases are just from the fact that this thing is level 9. So that's a fair point. Anyway, the Destroyers of the Drakwold, the Ungor Spearmen herd with shields, they are a poison spear unit. Are these guys going to be worth the extra money? Well, it's hard to say. I mean, 600 for an Ungor spear herd is a lot. They do have decent leadership, but, I mean, there's not a lot of armor there. They don't really gain any they don't gain any weapon damage. They will poison a unit, which decreases that unit's melee attack, and I think it slows them down, if I remember right. Let me go make sure I'm not misspeaking here. Yeah, I mean, here's all the effects. It's got a lot of effects. It takes their damage down. So, I mean, basically it'll slow down the damage that another unit is doing to them. Poison is certainly helpful against certain large foes. I think the problem with these guys is they're not a particularly fast unit to begin with. What may have made this unit slightly more interesting was if they added the poison and maybe a speed buff to these guys that made them get around a little bit quicker, that made that poison even more dangerous. I don't know how these, I mean, I think in campaign these guys would be a no-brainer if you want to use them. I'm not sure how they're going to balance in from a multiplayer standpoint, but time will tell. Gore herds with shields have a special variant here as well, and these guys are the Black Horns Ravagers, and they are a pretty interesting unit. They cost 250 more than their base counterparts. Now, beyond just the level 9 buffs, which usually are just leadership, melee attack, and defense, which these guys get, and it's 10 leadership, 10 melee attack, 11 defense. They also get another 8 charge bonus and 20 armor, which is kind of a big deal because Gore herds don't have a whole lot of armor. So it gives these guys a little more durability and a lot harder hitting charge. They also pick up Vanguard deployment, Stalk, and a special ability down here, which I'll go show you. And the special ability is Rowdy, which makes them immune to Vigor and gives them an extra 4 leadership, as long as their leadership is not wavering. So not a bad bonus there, especially considering their Vanguard deploy, and they may find themselves somewhat, you know, overextended sometimes. So that's the Black Horns Ravagers. I could see this unit being useful if you were looking to have a really good Khazrak all-rush army. And again, in campaign, why not use these guys, right? They would be a handy unit. It's pretty easy to get some good Vanguard deploys off against the AI. So I could see this one potentially being useful in multiplayer. I'm not 100% convinced, but I think it could be, especially in the right scenarios. Bestigor Herd have a special variant, which is pretty cool. It's the Koroks Man Rippers. This is a special glaive infantry, so rather than being armed with an axe, they're armed with a glaive, kind of like the Centaurs with great weapons have. These guys pick up a bonus versus large, which makes them a now very unique unit. They still do very good armor piercing damage, but then they have a significant bonus versus large at 16. And if you take a look at the stats on the standard Bestigor, 3 more armor piercing than the Man Rippers, but they don't have the bonus versus large. So these guys will still be decent versus armored infantry, and they'll be very good versus large foes. I could see these guys being very good versus an armored large lord. Something that doesn't have physical resistance, for instance, they would be good against that. And if we take a look at the ability comparison, they pick up a charge bonus against large foes, which means if they're braced, they will deflect or negate. They won't deflect it. They will, well, I guess it would be deflect. They won't reflect, but they will negate the charge bonus for that large foe if they are braced, which means they have to be standing still and facing the enemy that's charging them. So definitely an interesting unit, and if we look, I mean, again, just due to the fact that they pick up leadership and melee attack and defense is mostly because of their rank, but you can see these guys get plus 27. Part of that is not just from ranking up to level 9. Part of that is additional melee defense because they're a more defensive anti-large unit. They give them that extra defense to help resist those charges that they're going to take. You can see their weapon strength went down a little, and it's because they gave them some of the anti-large. They balanced it out, and they lost some charge bonus because they're not meant to be as offensive of a unit as a standard Bestigor. So that's kind of why the changes there. I definitely think this Man Rippers unit will be useful in both multiplayer and campaign. Having an anti-large armor-piercing infantry that's as solid and sturdy as a Bestigor could certainly come in handy for defending key units, especially stuff like Gorbals and your Lord, if Flyers and other units come down. So cool unit indeed, and I like the name too, Man Rippers, can't go wrong with that. So Centaurs with great weapons also got a special variant in the Regiments of Renown. They got the Sons of Goros. These are Centaurs, like I said, with great weapons. A few differences here. They pick up magic attacks, and then otherwise you can see that they also pick up 35 armor, which is also a big deal because that's one of the biggest downsides of a Centaur, is that their very low armor makes them extremely vulnerable to missile fire, and it also means that they have a lot less durability when they get into a melee engagement. Otherwise, they picked up the pretty typical buffs that come along with coming up to level 9, and then if we look, they also pick up an ability down here, which is 36% physical resistance. It's the Guardian. So again, this unit could be very handy. Now, it works as long as the unit is a lord or a hero, so imagine Gorbals now helping to be protected by these guys, and a Gorbal gets 36% physical resistance, which is essentially the same thing as raising its hit points by 36%, if it's not a magical attack incoming. So interesting indeed how these guys could be employed. Morgur with these guys, he's going to be freaking tanky because he already heals a lot. And he has missile resistance. So, I mean, and I think Morgur has magic resistance, if I remember right. That could be bad. Oh, yeah, that could be bad indeed. Where's the Shadow Gave here? Yeah, he has magic resistance. So, that is going to be ugly, the way that balances in. But in any case, these guys could be very useful in helping to protect leaders of the Beastmen, which they need. Beastmen rely on their strong leader units to help get the job done because they have somewhat flimsy infantry for the most part. Now, one of my favorite units, and maybe the favorite unit to come out, I mean, unless there was such a thing as a Regiment of Renown Gorbal, which would be pretty cool. But no, at least it's Gorbal's little brothers. There's a Minotaur with Shield Regiment of Renown called the Butchers of Kalkengard, and these guys look amazing. Now, there's a very simple change, but it's going to be some very dangerous change when you look at it. The regular level 9 upgrades are there, plus 10 leadership, plus 11 melee attack, plus 10 defense. The real kicker here is they pick up 2 abilities. Both are very important. Terror is going to be a huge deal. Gorbals do cause Minotaurs cause fear, but now these are going to cause terror, and that's a lot bigger deal because terror can induce the routing, and I think has bigger penalties with it. So being able to smash through an enemy line like these guys can and get into the back lines while causing terror, and they now regenerate. So it does make them weak to fire damage by 20%, but it means they regenerate, which is huge. If they rout and they start running away, they'll start regaining hit points, or it just makes them harder to wear down. This is definitely going to be a useful unit both in online battles and in campaign. Really good unit here in the Butchers of Kalkengard. These guys are going to be spectacular. Their focus is anti-armor. They do not have a bonus versus large. If you had a unit like spears or these man rippers combined with these guys, they could certainly be helpful against large foes who are well armored. But bear in mind that these guys do not have specifically an anti-large bonus, which means that I think they will be better off facing armored infantry. That would probably be the more appropriate target for them. Or at least if they're going to face an armored cavalry unit, it would have to be one that doesn't have a bonus versus large of its own, or else they'll probably overpower the butchers. But I may not be right there. I haven't given it thorough testing. That's just a guess. Now, lastly but not least, the Cygor of all units picked up a Regiment of Renown, which is the Eye of Morsley. So this Cygor definitely has a pretty interesting difference here in the sense that it comes with a Hex, which is one that you target. You can target an enemy within 200 meters. It lasts for 16 seconds, and they can't move. It's called Warp Gaze. Now, it comes in with a 90-second cooldown, so it's not going to be able to be spammed. But if used properly, like for instance on a Flying Lord or something else that comes into land and doesn't realize, this is going to give the Beastmen a very interesting ability here that if used properly could devastate an unsuspecting opponent who thinks they have all the advantage by flying around in the air or bringing in a lord on foot or something else like Kolek, for instance, charging in. If he gets frozen in place, mobbed by Gorbals and, you know, shot with arrows or all kinds of stuff, or Karl Franz thinks he's going to land right in the middle of your party, those are the kind of things where I think this Warp Gaze could be very useful. And if we look, there's some other differences as well. The missile damage goes up. That's probably because this thing has a better reload. I guess it's possible that they just up the straight damage here, so it's 50, 281, 55. Let's see, 50, 280. Yeah, so it's basically got better reload time. See, their reload time is 10.5 seconds. And if we come down here, reload time is 13.5 seconds. So it's 3 seconds faster reload, which the missile damage on here is charted out in terms of damage over a certain period of time, and so that's why the damage goes up with the Eye of Morsley. He has magical attacks, both melee and with the ammunition. I'm not really sure why regular Cygors don't have magical attacks. I mean, they are picking up a magic rock out of the ground, but one way or the other, he picks up those magic attacks, and basically, again, the other differences are just from being rank 9. So definitely cool units for the Beastmen, and I like this. The Beastmen were probably one of the weaker factions in multiplayer. They do just fine in campaign. You can just absolutely wreck people with them in campaign, so no complaint there. But in multiplayer, they were a little bit weak. I think it's nice for them to have these Regiments of Renown because it gives them a few more tricks up their sleeves and helps keep them competitive with, quite honestly, what are some very good factions out there. Empire is still very good. Greenskins are still very good. Vampires are still very good. Bretonnia is still very good. Norska joins into the scene, and they are very good. I don't know if they're tier 1, but they're darn close if they're not tier 1. So the Beastmen definitely needed this kind of help, and it's really good to see them get this. It's some cool units. Are there more units that we would have liked to see with the Beastmen? Absolutely. There's always more units we want to see in this game, and who knows, maybe we'll get them one day. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed the footage of these units that was spliced into the background and a quick explanation of what they are, so we'll just quickly cover again. Poison Spearmen, obviously going to be good against large and slowing stuff down. Blackhorn's Ravagers here are just going to be a good vanguard unit. These guys are going to be good versus unarmored infantry. That's going to be their main use. Man Rippers, these guys are going to be good versus armored large foes. Remember, they have a charge defense against large. The Sons of Goros need to be used to protect your lords and your heroes, and they're going to be good against armored foes. They are good at helping pin down units. They're fast moving, so on and so forth. The Butchers of Kalkengard are going to be an anti-armored infantry unit. Use them to smash armored infantry, like great swords, Grave Guard, other stuff like that. Black Orcs. That's the place where you're going to want these guys fighting, ideally. The Eye of Morsley it's a artillery unit, just like its cousin. But this one's going to be better in the sense that it reloads faster and it has the magical attacks, which can be handy against certain units. As you can imagine, like for instance, throwing in this Cygor against the Wood Elves who have a lot of physical resistance, this guy's going to do more damage because he has magical damage from his missiles and he has magic damage on his melee attack. So that's where these units could come in handy, is against factions that field quite a few units who have physical resistance. However, there's some people who have magic resistance too, like the Dwarves. So fielding this guy against the Dwarves, maybe not such a good plan because they're going to resist a considerable amount of his attacks. So just a couple of thoughts around these units. Hope it's helpful. Hope you all enjoyed this one. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I'll see you all soon.